What's up, guys? You were watching Fight Feed, and today I'm going to be breaking down every single fight on the UFC Fight Night that is happening in Shanghai, China on August 23rd, 2025. Not only is this card the return of the cartoon Looney Tune knockout artist or knocked out artist of Johnny Walker, but also it's got one of my favorite fighters in the UFC, Mr. Salty Balls himself, Satybaldiev. Can't wait to see this guy get back in there, and I'm actually dead serious. Although I like to joke around about his name, calling him Salty Balls, he is a killer, guys. Seeing what he did against Martin Buday and hearing Dominic Cruz talk the entire 15-minute fight about how Martin Buday weighed 65 pounds more than him. I was annoyed by Dominic Cruz there, but I will say it is a massive feat for him to go in on short notice at light heavyweight. Being a light heavyweight and then go up against Martin Buday, who's a tank of a man, fighting at heavyweight just to get that crack at a UFC shot. So very excited. Now, this card, guys, is a little bit weird because if you haven't noticed, I live in Arizona, but the fight times for this card, I believe it starts the main card is at 6 a.m. Eastern time. And that means that the prelims are 3 a.m. Eastern, which means this card will be happening at like midnight Saturday, my time. And then 2 a.m. is the main card. Basically, if I want to watch this card live, I just have to pull an all-nighter, essentially, is the way that I have positioned it with myself. So what I'm going to say before I dive into my picks is if you guys would have any type of interest in if I were to do some type of live stream and watch these fights and you guys would want to join and keep me company there, let me know in the comments. It's all right if you don't want to. Just let me know. That way I can decide if it's even worth doing. But before I dive into the full picks, just want to say thank you guys for tuning in. And here's a quick message from my sponsor. If you aren't subscribed to Fight Feed, you! All right, diving into what I believe is the first fight of the night, guys. I will say I am recording this a little bit early here, trying to get ahead of some of these fight nights. So very likely things will change based on just what we know about the UFC, right? But at any rate, I believe this will be the first fight, and it is Xiao Long versus Yu Su-young. So looking at both these fighters, Xiao Long, 27 years old. He's 5'8" with a 70-inch reach. This is a bantamweight bout, so they're fighting at 135 pounds. Xiao Long's 27-9 with a 1-1 record in the UFC. Su-young is 29 years old, 5'6", 65-inch reach, 135 pounds, as I mentioned, 15-3 record with a 2-0 record in the UFC. Looking at the styles for fight number one, we've got both these guys are pretty well-balanced MMA fighters from what I can see. If you look at their records, Xiao Long's got 33% of his wins by KO. He's got 19% of his wins, 33% of his wins are by sub. 19% of his wins are by KO. 48% of his wins are by decision. And then on the other side, you've got Yu Su-young, who has 33% of his wins by sub, 20% of his wins by KO, and then 47% of his wins by decision. So each of these guys are very similar in that they tend to go for submissions if they're finishing a fight. And their KO rate is pretty neck and neck as well. But then obviously a majority of their fights ending in decision. So they do have a mixed bag of skills, is the way I look at it anyways. Now, weaknesses for Xiao Long. He's got 3 losses by KO, but he hasn't been finished in 19 fights. Now, on the other side with Yu Su-young, some weaknesses for Yu Su-young. He's just not a super active striker based on the stats that I can see. And now he only has a couple fights in the UFC, but he's only averaging about 1.8 strikes per minute, which is pretty low compared to some of the other guys in the UFC. Momentum check for these guys. So Xiao Long's got 1 fight win streak, last fought on November 23rd, 2024. His last 4 fights are Quang Li. Before that, he lost to Chang Ho Li. And then before that, he had a win over a guy with the last name of Kamikupo, and then a win over another guy who is Shohei Nos. I don't know how to say that. So if you guys know, let me know. I did include some of their records there just so you guys can get an idea. Clearly, on this front, it looks like these guys that he fought definitely have a decent record in terms of wins compared to losses. Looking at Yu Su-young, though, 4-fight win streak, last fought on March 15th, 2025. So he's a little bit more active. And as I mentioned, he's coming off of a 4-fight win streak. So taking a look at his last 4 fights, he's got a win over Cunningham, a win over Gillespie. I think if that's how you say that. A win over, I don't know, guys, something with a Z. And then a win over Nose as well, which I believe is the same fighter that Xiao Long fought 4 fights ago. So pretty interesting. But taking a look at the intangibles and X factors. So from what I can see, obviously Xiao Long is the home fighter here. He's born and from China. He is going to want to get a win, guys. It's going to be very high pressure, I would say, for him to get a win in his hometown. Now, on the other hand, Yusu Young, not the home fighter, but he is riding that 4-fight win streak. He's going to want to get a win so he can continue building on that streak. Ultimately, guys, I did go Su Young here because I just feel like overall his skill set is a bit better. And if you really dig into his strength of schedule, I think that it's a little bit better than that of Xiao Long. And that's mainly because some of the guys that he's fought already had tested records in the UFC, but also had more fights overall, which I think is just going to add to your strength of schedule if you're looking at it from that perspective. I think this fight probably ends in a decision, and I have a 3 out of 5 confidence. Fight number 2 on the card. We got Loner Kavanagh versus Charles Energy Johnson. I love Charles Johnson, guys. This guy's a fucking monster. Loner Kavanagh, 26 years old, 5'4", 67-inch reach, 125 pounds because this is a flyweight bout. He is 9-0 with a 2-0 record in the UFC. He also has a wealth of experience being a kickboxer. Actually started kickboxing when he was very young. Charles Johnson, on the other hand, 34 years old, 5'9", 70-inch reach, 17-7 record with a 6-5 record in the UFC. So taking a look at the styles for fight number 2, obviously Loner Kavanagh is one of the hottest prospects the UFC has in the flyweight division. Pretty much going to be a dark horse, I think, in this division and maybe even a future champ at some point. Really just one of the best flyweight prospects. Taking a look at some of the things that he does well, he has great hands, as I mentioned, because of his wealth of background in kickboxing. 44% of his wins are by knockout. 11% of his wins are by submission. So he does have that submission threat if he needs it. But obviously, from a statistical standpoint, he is more than likely going to put them paws on you. Now, weaknesses for Loner Kavanagh are just his strength of schedule, perhaps. That's really all I have to write home about at this point about him, because that's... So the only weakness that I have for Loner Kavanagh is really kind of a question mark, more of a... It's like, I don't know for sure yet, but it's basically, if you're looking at his record, it's the strength of schedule, right? And what I mean by that is, obviously he has great wins over some other hot up-and-coming prospects, like Ochoa, Dos Santos. However, the reason I put strength of schedule as a question mark here is those guys have still kind of young in their careers. So obviously I think the world of some of these other guys he's beat, but I just don't know, like, from a strength of schedule standpoint, if those wins are truly as great as we think they are, because we still have to kind of see what these other guys are going to do with their careers. But outside of that, I think he's a very well-rounded fighter who has the abilities in every category, really, to go out there and get a W. Now, on the other side, we got Inner G, Charles Johnson. A straight G is my first point on this guy, because he is a straight G, in my opinion. I mean, this guy has gone out there and he's been one of those dark horses in the flyweight division who's been able to knock off several different prospects. One prospect was an undefeated wrestling heavy fighter from Kazakhstan, wherever Shavkat's from. So not only that, he also, the point that I put, he has a KO win over Josh Van, which is nuts. It really is nuts. But that just shows you Charles Johnson's one of those guys. He's going to be out there to scrap and look for a finish whenever he can. Taking a look at his stats, 35% of his wins by KO, 24% of his wins by submission. He has never been finished. So Charles Johnson is that guy. Weaknesses for him, I just think he allows his opponents to get ahead in certain fights, especially when it's against a guy who has a little bit more of a grappling heavy game, if you will. Like his last fight, for instance, that he lost, I think he just let his opponent get too far ahead on the scorecards, and because of that, he ends up losing. And so a weakness here is really just he lets those opponents get ahead, and that is a testament to why he has lost all of his losses by decision. Obviously never been finished, but he just lets his opponents win those rounds, whether it be from strikes or grappling points. I think he just sometimes lets them get ahead and he's unable to close the show. And actually in a couple times where he's been able to cinch a win off of a hot up and coming prospect, he actually steals the fight in like the last round. So that is a big thing that happened with Josh Van. I think Josh Van was winning that fight, and then he caught Josh Van and knocked him out. So there's just those moments with the energy where he just lets them get ahead. Now, taking a look at the momentum for these guys. Loner Kavanagh, 11-fight win streak. Last fought in London on March 22nd, 2025. He got a win over Dos Santos there. Before that, he got a win over Ochoa. Before that, a win over Tan Ho, he's actually fighting and trains out of MMA Lab. I saw that Contender Series fight. Tan Ho was like very, very glorified in that fight in terms of like, hey, this guy's got knockout power, 6-0. They were both 6-0, and Loner Kavanagh KO'd him on the Contender Series. So that was a great win. Before that, a win over Da Silva. Now, taking a look at Charles Johnson. 1-loss streak for him. He last fought on March 1st, 2025. So these guys are very in sync in terms of when they last fought. He lost to Temirov in that fight. Before that, he got a win over Mudaerji. Before that, he got a win over Josh Van. And before that, Jake Hadley. Looking at the intangibles and X Factor. So neither of these guys are the home fighter in this matchup. But I think that there is still some pressure here because on the side of Loner Kavanagh, undefeated hot prospect in the UFC, he is going to want to keep building on that win streak that he has, obviously, not only in his UFC win streak, but his overall record winning streak. And then taking a look at the red flags is just, we haven't seen him, at least in the UFC, deal with the style that CJ brings to the table. CJ being my boy energy, Charles Johnson. Charles Johnson, on the other hand, he's not the home fighter, as I mentioned. Pressure for him is he's going to want to get a bounce back win off that loss in March. Before he lost in March, guys, he was on a 5-fight win streak, I believe. So Charles Johnson has been very accustomed to winning fights, and I think he's going to want to get back out there. And honestly, this is a great chance for him to try to do a typical energy move where he somehow gets the win over a hot prospect here. But with that, I am choosing Kavanagh in this fight. And the reason I'm going Kavanagh is mainly just because I think Kavanagh is one of the cleanest strikers that I've seen. Obviously, he has that KO power. He has that ability to knock somebody out. But I really just like his fundamental ability of keeping his hands high, keeping his guard high, getting away from his opponent's strikes, landing his strikes and getting out of range. I think that type of style is going to pose a lot of problems for the energy. Now, I did call out here, guys, there is a high chance that Johnson somehow pulls this off because Johnson sometimes has that Dricus du Plessis ability where he can just, draw a hole in the floor. But take that risk if you feel like it. I feel like Kavanagh is the safe bet here. I think he will win by decision, 4 out of 5 confidence. Fight number 3 on the card. We got my boy, Uran, Satybaldiev versus Diyar Nurgozhay. So, looking at these gentlemen, making sure I didn't cut anything off on the screen here, guys. Taking a look at these guys, Satybaldiev is 31 years old, 6'4", 79-inch reach, 9-1 record, 0-1 in the UFC. Nothing really to be ashamed about there. He did have a fight against a huge guy, like I said. Nurgozhay, 28 years old, 6'2", 74-inch reach, 10-1 record, 1-1 in the UFC. The styles for this fight, like I said, my boy Satybaldiev, stand and bang, bro. This guy wants to go out there, stand and bang, and just knock his opponents out if he can. 67% of his wins by knockout. I did put a note there, obviously, that I've already said to you guys about how he went out there and we had to hear Dominic Cruz talk about it way too much, where he fought like a guy that's 65 pounds heavier. And one thing I would call out here too about him is that he also has some submission skill. He does have a win by Kimura. So it's not like he's a complete fish out of water when it comes to being on the ground. He does have the ability to attack those submissions if he needs to. Weaknesses is that I just think he did take a lot of unnecessary damage probably against Martin Buday. And the reason I think it's unnecessary is because obviously that matchup going into it, you would think that he wouldn't want to take a matchup where he's going up against a guy that's that much bigger than him. So I think any damage he kind of accumulated from that fight is unnecessary. But it did get his foot in the door. He did have a great performance, in my opinion. I think we'll just have to see how he deals with that, because obviously he did take some big shots in that fight. Nurgozhay, on the other hand, 60% of his wins by KO, 20% of his wins by submission. So he does have that submission threat himself. One thing that I call out as a weakness for him is that he did lose this year, and it was a pretty tough loss to lose to Brenson Ribeiro by I think it was by a Kimura. Not really that good of a look, because Brenson Ribeiro, although he, I think, came off Contender Series and had a lot of hype, a few years ago, he has not really turned out to be, I think, the fighter that everybody expected. So I think that is a questionable loss on Nurgozhay's record there. Momentum check, they're both coming off of a loss. Obviously, Satybaldiev fought April 5th, 2025. He lost to bout, as I said. Before that, he has a couple wins over guys that I'm not even going to try to pronounce their names, but you can see that their records are here, and they did have a decent amount of fights for each of them. Obviously, the last guy there only being 5-4, a little bit still less experience, if you will. Nurgozhay, coming off a loss as well, fought 3-15-25, lost to Ribeiro, as I said, and then he had a few wins before that. I can't even say their names, guys. I really can't. But these guys had a lot of experience as well. It kind of makes me question my pick, but we'll see what happens. Intangibles and X factors. So taking a look at this, we've got both men are really not the home fighter here, if you will. Neither one of them are from this specific area. I said that Satybaldiev is going to want to get a finish or a win so he can get in that win column in the UFC, since he's 0-1 right now. Nurgozhay, on the other hand, not the home fighter, as I mentioned. He's going to want to bounce back from his last loss as well. Ultimately, guys, y'all know I'm going Satybaldiev. I just love my boy, Satybaldiev. I think that he can get the win here, guys. I was really, all jokes aside, I was very impressed with his ability to stand and bang with a guy that is much bigger than him in Martin Bout. And I think that if he brings that approach to this fight, he has every opportunity and chance to not only hurt his opponent, but get him out of there. And I think he can get the KO. 3 out of 5 confidence. Jumping into what is fight number 4, we got Rong versus Austin Thud Hubbard. Rong is 25 years old, 5'9", 71-inch reach, 155 pounds, because this is at lightweight, 26-6 record, 2-3 in the UFC. Austin Thud Hubbard is 33 years old, 5'10", 71-inch reach, 16-9 record with a 4-7 record in the UFC. Styles for this fight. So Rong is a striker through and through. 54% of his wins by KO. Also has that submission threat, though. 27% of his wins by submission. I put here solid striking. He has 5.90 strikes landed per minute. So that is, to give you guys a gauge. Remember the earlier fighter I mentioned, I think on fight 1, only had 1.8 strikes per minute. So he is like 4 times that, basically. Or I guess not 4 times, but 3 times maybe. And weaknesses for him is he has had trouble in his past fights with bigger opponents. So that is something that I put here. Not only just bigger opponents, but those bigger opponents who have a little bit of that grappling threat. He has shown to have a little bit of issue there. But he does have great takedown defense. So that does play in his favor with that in regard. Now, looking at Austin Hubbard. Well-balanced MMA fighter. I would say that Thud has the ability on the feet and on the grappling. Like, he can do the offensive grappling, the offensive wrestling, good defensive wrestling as well. Also good at getting guys up against the cage. And he can also, land those shots on the feet. I mean, looking at his stuff, he's got 56% of his wins by decision, but he does have the ability on the feet to still get KOs, 25% of those wins coming by knockout. Looking at another note that I had here, I have a note here that Austin Hubbard he's never been KO'd in his entire career. So that is something to keep in mind. Now, that is professional career. That doesn't count amateur stuff. So if he's been KO'd in the amateurs, that's a different story. Weaknesses, Austin Thud Hubbard. He lets his opponents get ahead in fights, I think, because sometimes I think he just doesn't find a way to stamp his dominance in the cage, if you will. I think that he just lets his opponents get ahead due to lack of activity at times, or his opponents get him down to the ground and he just doesn't have the ability to get back up to his feet quickly. Just lets his opponents kind of get the edge sometimes, which ultimately ends up being why he loses and has lost a lot of fights by decision. Taking a look at momentum check, Rong 1-fight win streak. He last fought on February 8th, 2025. He beat Steele in that fight. And then before that, he lost to Padilla. But before that, he won over, don't know who that is. And I don't know who the other guy is. So take that for what it's worth. But, they did have good records, 7-0, 9-2. Steele was 7-0 as well. So very good. I mean, solid strength of schedule, if you will, for, his recent 4 fights. Now, looking at Thud Hubbard, he's coming off of 2 losses here. 3-29-25 is when he last fought. A lot of people thought that he might have gotten that win against Medeiros. I think Medeiros won, but I thought that Hubbard did a good job for what he was able to at least try to implement in that fight. Before that, he got a loss to Hernandez, which I also think was a split decision. Before that, he got a win over Figlak and a loss to Holabal before that. Intangibles and X factors for this fight. So Rong is going to be the home fighter. Extreme pressure, though, because this is his hometown. He's going to want to get a win here, guys. Now, Thud Hubbard. I think that if he loses, he'll be on a 3-fight skid, and that is worrisome, especially considering he's in the lightweight division, and he's been cut from the UFC previously. Red flags is I just don't know how he'll be able to deal with Rong. Like, I don't know what that game plan will be from him, because Rong seems to be the type of guy who can kind of stake his claim wherever the fight goes. So that's just a red flag I called out. And honestly, guys, that is why I have to go Rong in this fight. I just don't see how Austin Hubbard, being the older guy here, and although he has that crafty experience, I just don't know how he'll be able to deal with the offense and all of the different attacks that Rong can bring to him. I see Rong just being able to outstrike Hubbard and kind of implement his game there, ultimately bringing it to a decision. 3 out of 5 confidence. All right, jumping into fight number 5 on this card, we've got Maheshate. I don't know how to say it. Hayisaer. I'm sorry, guys. I'm trying my best. He is 25 years old, 6 foot tall, 71.5 inch reach, fighting at lightweight as well, so 155 pounds, 10-4 record with a 2-3 record in the UFC. On the other side, we got Gage Young, 25 years old, 5'9", 70 inch reach, 9-3 with an 0-1 record in the UFC. Styles makes fights. Let's take a look at Maheshate. He's got 40% of his wins by KO, 50% of his wins by decision. He has good striking, but a few weaknesses that I have for him. He just has a few questionable losses on his record, and he's got a bad striking accuracy, guys. Only 29% striking accuracy, which is pretty abysmal compared to some of the other fighters I've seen. Gage Young, on the other hand, 67% of his wins by KO, 22% of his wins by decision. He is definitely the type to go out there, stand and bang and look for that KO. The only weakness I have for Gage Young right now is just he did absorb a lot of damage in his last fight against Evan Elder. But you will see this note. I feel like Gage Young, he really impressed me in that fight against Evan Elder. He came up on like a few days' notice, and he gave Evan Elder everything he could. Like, he tried to land as much as he could. He was landing hard, thudding shots, Evan Elder, but Evan Elder just had that slick lead, I think it was a lead body roundhouse that he just landed the entire fight. But Gage Young stayed in there and scrapped it out as best as he could on short notice, and you got to give a guy credit. And I think also he still went for the kill, even though he probably didn't have a training camp whatsoever. Momentum check. Both guys are coming off of a loss. A loss to Mata on 11-23-24. Before that, he got a win over Benitez. And then before that, he had a loss to Slavaklaus and a loss to Garcia. And those are very questionable losses. Those are some of the ones that I'm like, Slavaklaus is dangerous, but what we've seen from Slavaklaus in the UFC thus far, it makes you kind of question Maheshate's game in this fight. Now, Gage Young, on the other hand, last fought Kansas City, Missouri on 4/26/25. He lost to Evan Elder, got a win over Grant before that, a loss to Salkild before that, which Salkild I think is also a very hot prospect at the moment, very solid fighter as well. Before that, a win over Tully. So I think if you're looking at strength of schedule, obviously Maheshate's had a better strength of schedule, but Gage Young has also gone out there with some very highly skilled opposition and done well. Taking a look at intangibles and X factors. Maheshate was born in China, so this is his hometown. He is going to want not only a bounce back win, but he's really going to want to win at home. Now, red flag I have, he doesn't have the best chin. He has been KO'd a few times, and also by guys that are not like true KO artists, if you will. Now, Gage Young, on the other hand, he is going to want to get his first UFC win, so there is a lot of pressure there. And a red flag I have called out is travel and like the actual fight time in China. Those are going to be big red flags for Gage Young, mainly because he's coming from America. He's going to have to get there early and all of the sorts. So hopefully that is what he is doing, so that way he can be best prepared for this matchup. Guys, I'm going fucking Gage Young on this one. I was, like I said, really impressed with his ability in the fight against Evan Elder. I think if he brings that same tenacity and that same will to win, trying to land shots as much as he can, landing some body work, some head work, I feel like his hands could be the outlier in catching Maheshate and putting him out. I'm thinking he can get this done by KO. Now, it's like I said, you have to consider those red flags. He is traveling for this fight, so it could go the other way, but I am thinking that Gage Young can get this one done. 3 out of 5 confidence. Taking a look at our fight number 6. Fight number 6 on the card, we've got Mudaerji versus Kevin Borjas. So Mudaerji's 29 years old, 5'8", 72-inch reach, 17-7 record with a 4-4 record in the UFC. He's got a very long reach. He's 5'8", which means he's 68 inches tall, but his reach is 72 inches, so that's decent. Kevin Borjas, 27 years old, 5'5", 68-inch reach, 10-3 record with a 1-2 record in the UFC. Styles for this fight, 76% of Mudaerji's wins are by KO. He's likely also going to have other strategies in his game because he does have Uriah Faber as a coach. He does train with the guys at Team Alpha Male. So I think that although on paper he has a lot more striking accolades and striking wins, now that he is training with those guys at Team Alpha Male, he could very well get a win or have those strategies in the other departments, whether it be wrestling, grappling, even throwing up submissions. Weaknesses I have for Mudaerji, bad submission defense. And the reason I say that, he has 6 losses by submission. So it seems as though if the fight gets to the ground and he is not in control, it's likely he could be subbed. Now, I would say another thing I would call out for him, he keeps his guard very low when he's striking, and that is something that is also a red flag against a guy in Kevin Borjas, who seems to be a bit of a sniper. Borjas, on the other hand, 80% of his wins by KO. I am really impressed with the improvements he's made in his game. His last fight, he really looked solid against Sleepy Boy, dropped him several times, and just looked super crispy on the feet. What I would say for him, he doesn't seem to do too well with guys that have a grappling heavy approach, but I don't think he necessarily has to worry about that against Mudaerji. Taking a look at the momentum here. So Mudaerji's coming off a 1-fight win streak, last fought 4-12-25. He got that pretty lackluster win over Raposo, pretty boring and abysmal fight if you ask me. Before that, a loss to Johnson, a loss to Elliott, and a loss to Schnell. Borjas, on the other hand, coming off a 1-fight win streak, had a win over Sleepy Boy Rodriguez. Don't even know how Rodriguez is 17-2. Like, that guy is, he is not impressed me, guys. Ode Osborne also whooped his ass. Before that, a loss over Costa, and before that, a loss to Josh Van. Not really the worst thing in the world. And then before that, a win over Diaz. Intangibles and X factors. So Mudaerji is from China, hometown fighter. He is going to want to get a main event win, or not a main event. He's going to want to get a win here at his hometown. Red flag, once again, I just don't like how Sergei has his guard so open, especially going up against Kevin Borjas, who seems to have a laser pointer or like a piston type straight down the pipe. I feel like that is going to be something that he's going to have challenges with if he has his guard down the way he did in his previous fights. Borjas, not the home fighter. He's going to want to build off his last win, though. And a red flag I'd call out for Borjas, he will have a decent size advantage in this fight in the height and reach department. Although there's that, I will say Borjas is my pick, guys. I think that Borjas, like I said, seemed to make several different improvements fight after fight, and I'm really impressed with how much he's been able to improve. He is a Peruvian fighter as well. Not many of them in the UFC. He seems to have that grit to him. He wants to be that successful example from his country. I just believe that he can go out there and get the job done. He's a very smart, high IQ fighter as well from what I've seen. So I think he could get this one done by decision, just utilizing those straights that he uses and ultimately get a decision, 3 out of 5 confidence. Fight number 7. And guys, I'm going to just let you know, the graphics on this one are all jacked up because I had started making the graphics like on an old template. So just keep that in mind. These ones don't look that great. But we've got Yiza versus Westin Wilson. Yiza's 28 years old, 5'7", 71-inch reach, 25-5 record, 0-2 in the UFC. Westin Wilson, 36, 6'1", 73-inch reach, 17-9 record, 1-2 in the UFC. Styles for this fight: Yiza's 56% of Yiza's wins are by submission, 14 wins by sub. So he is a submission ace looking for finishes on the ground. A weakness I had for Yiza is that he seems to lose by decision quite a bit, and they're like close decisions. I think he has a couple split decisions on his record. Westin Wilson, though, strengths for him, very good grappling, and obviously this Westin Wilson trains with Wonderboy Thompson, so he is going to have a at least basic understanding of the striking game, right? Obviously working with a legend, especially a very well-seasoned legend in Wonderboy Thompson, he's going to pick up some of those tricks of the trade, if you will, in the striking department. But he is relatively or mainly a grappling ace. 71% of his wins by submission. That's 12 wins by submission. So he is also going to be looking probably to get things to the ground. So this could be a bit of a grappler's delight, if you will. I would say some weaknesses. Westin Wilson does have a bit of a questionable chin. 2 bad KOs, recently. One of those being from Gene Silva, which you can't really fault him for. Gene Silva seems to have rock hands. So momentum check. So this is where you can see these graphics are really just jacked the fuck up. Yiza is coming off of a 1-fight loss streak. 9-7-24 is when he last fought. He lost to Santos, but before that he had a win over Lee, a win over Juan Kim, and a win over I don't know. Wes Wilson, on the other hand, coming off of a 1-fight win streak. Last fought on June 15, 2024. He got a win over Sergei, which, if you guys don't remember, that was like I think he was like a Thai fighter. Is he from Thailand? No, maybe not Thailand. I can't remember where he's from. Maybe the Philippines. Sergei got KO'd pretty badly, though. Not against Wes Wilson, but recently. Who knocked him out? I can't remember, but I know he did get knocked out recently. He lost to Gene Silva before that, a loss to Joe Anderson Brito before that, and a win over Franco before that. Intangibles and X Factor. So Yiza is the home fighter. He is going to want to get a win in his hometown, of course. Wes Wilson, not the home fighter. Not a ton of pressure either. I think he is going to want to get a win, though, because, being in the featherweight division and 36, if he loses badly here, it could be it for him in the UFC, maybe. We'll just have to see. Now, my pick is Yiza. I just think that Yiza not only has that youth advantage, guys, I think that he also clearly, from his record, has more wins by submission. I just think he'll be able to win in those grappling exchanges, potentially getting a submission or just riding it out to decision. But I'm not like super confident, but I do think he'll win 3 out of 5. Fight number 8 on the card, we've got Michel Pereira versus Kyle Daukaus. If you guys have been watching my channel, there was actually a video I made not too long ago where I literally said, what the fuck happened to Kyle Daukaus? I feel like him and his brother were all around, in the early 2020s in the UFC, and we haven't seen them in a while. And then suddenly I'm, doing research, and Kyle Daukaus is there. So shout out to Kyle Daukaus. Michel Pereira is 31 years old, 6'1", 73-inch reach, 31-13 record, 9-4 in the UFC. Daukaus, on the other hand, 32, 6'3". Very weird, though, because he's listed as 6'3" by the UFC, but if you guys did any research like I did, I watched some of his recent fights in these other local promotions where he's listed as 6'4", so I can't get a gauge on, it's only an inch, but regardless, 76-inch reach, 15-4 record, 2-4 in the UFC. And Kyle Daukaus is coming up on short notice, kind of. So this is a short notice opportunity for him to get back into the UFC. He also hasn't fought in a while. Strengths from Michel Pereira. Some of the best and most sick capoeira style that I've seen in the UFC. The guy can do all kinds of crazy shit, but he can usually only do it for one round because he gets gassed. 37% of his wins by knockout. 27% of his wins by submission and 37% of his wins by decision. Weakness, very weak gas tank, as I mentioned just a moment ago. Kyle Daukaus, on the other hand, 73% of his wins by submission. He has a crafty style, I would say. He has an ability to kind of mix things up. He has clean striking at times, but I feel like what I would say is a weakness is his chin is questionable. He does have good boxing. He does keep, the basics pretty solid. He has the high guard. He's landing strikes. He's got a southpaw stance too. So can be a bit tricky on the feet. And then I think he's very good at mixing in those clinch exchanges and then getting things to the ground. Once he gets things to the ground, Kyle Daukaus is very solid there, can hold guys down and wear on them from a grappling perspective, also throwing up those submission threats. I will say, though, another weakness, he just doesn't seem to do that well with opponents that are a lot bigger than him. When he fought Eric Anders, he was landing at first, and he was a big favorite in that fight, actually, like a minus 210. But Eric Anders just wore on him and was able to land shots that ultimately ended up dropping him. And then he was able to ground and pound his way out of there. So I think that Kyle Daukaus might have struggles in a physicality matchup against Michel Pereira. Momentum check. So Pereira's coming off of 2 losses. He last fought 426-25, had a pretty bad loss to Abus Magomedov. Before that, a loss to Fluffy Hernandez. And then before that, he had a win over Pereira and a win over Michel Olishashik. Great body kick that he did on Michel. Now, Daukaus, on the other hand, 4-fight win streak. Last fought June 14, 2024. Win over Patershuk, a win over Fallon, a win over Ellis, and a win over Gidron. I don't know any of these guys, so they do have decent records, though, at least a lot of experience. Intangibles and X factors, neither one of these men are the home fighter, but Michel Pereira is going to want to get a win so he can snap this 2-fight losing streak. Kyle Daukaus is going to want to at least be competitive, look good in this fight, or get a win so he can stamp his claim to, be back in the UFC and obviously, get more fights with the UFC. Guys, I'm leaning Pereira here, but I have this weird feeling that Daukaus could pull it off. So if you guys are looking to hunt an underdog, I would say you could potentially sprinkle in on Daukaus, because Daukaus has that grappling ability, and I think that he has a game that could potentially force the gas tank of Michel Pereira to empty quicker. But there's also this very, very high potential that Pereira, being the striker that he is, lands a hard shot on Daukaus and puts his ass out. So I see it going the way of Pereira getting the win either by KO or decision. 3 out of 5 confidence. Fight number 9 on the card. We got Kiefer Crosbie. Hey, Kiefer. If you guys ever seen Teen Mom, Kiefer Crosbie. Hey, Kiefer. 35 years old, 5'11", 70-inch reach, 170 pounds, a welterweight bout. 10-5 record, 0-2 in the UFC. Now then we have on the other side, Taiyilake Nueraji, 24 years old, 6'2", 76.4-inch reach. That 0.4 is going to get him, man. 11-1 record, 0-0 in the UFC. Taiyilake is, he looks a lot older in that photo than 24. Styles for this fight, Kiefer Crosbie, 50% of his wins by KO. Really not a lot to write home about Kiefer Crosbie's game. 10-5 record. He just hasn't had a lot of success in the UFC, guys. And he seems to also have a bit of a weakness in the submission defense department. Taiyilake, on the other hand, 91% of his wins by KO. This guy is a finisher through and through. He has a style called Sando. I think that's how you say it. But Sando is like Chinese. It's a Chinese fighting style from what I did research on. It's one that allows not only for striking, the basics of striking, but also there's, clinch throws and throws to the ground, but it's not like Sambo is my understanding, because Sambo, I think you can do a lot more on the ground. In this style of fighting, you're actually, you're able to do a little bit on the ground, but very minimal. It's not meant to be a ground type sport is what I understand. So it's more so being on the feet, being able to mix in clinch and clinch throws, and also obviously the striking. Momentum check. So Kiefer Crosbie's got a 2-fight losing streak. He last fought on July 27, 2024. He lost to Sam Patterson. Before that, he lost to Kevin Jousset, both by submission. A win over Alex Oliveira, which I didn't even know that he was still fighting, but also a win over, I don't know who that is. Taiyilake, on the other hand, 8-10-24 is when he last fought. So not very active for being a very young fighter here. Got a win over Karpenkin. I don't know how to... I'm not even going to try, guys. His wins are over opponents that were not in the UFC, of course. Intangibles and X factors. So Kiefer Crosbie's not the home fighter, but he does need a win here, guys, because if he doesn't get a win, he could be dropped by the UFC, in my opinion. Taiyilake, on the other hand, home fighter. He is going to have a ton of pressure. Young prospect, going to want to get a statement win in his hometown. I am going with Taiyilake. I've seen a lot of his fights. I just think that his striking is going to be too much for Kiefer Crosbie. And on top of that, he's got that youth advantage, which in this case might not even help him that much because he's 24 to a 35-year-old, and there might be that grown man strength that Kiefer Crosbie has. But Tailake's going to have that height advantage, the reach advantage. I think he's just going to have kind of all the boxes checked for this lining up in his favor. And I also think his ability to mix attacks on the feet, like in one of his fights, he was able to knock a guy out with an elbow. That was a very beautiful knockout. Made the guy fall flat in his face. I see Taiyilake getting the fight done by KO, 4-5 confidence. The next fight on the card, which I think is now fight number 10, Sergei Pavlovich versus Waldo Cortes-Acosta. Okay, Sergei is 33 years old, 6'3", 84-inch reach. Sergei has the highest ape index in the UFC, from what I can tell, because he is only 75 inches tall. Not only, I'm 76 inches tall. I got Sergei by 1 inch, but he would beat my fucking ass. Anyways, which means he has an 11-inch ape index, which is crazy work. 19-3 record, 7-3 in the UFC. Waldo Cortes-Acosta is 33 years old, 6'4", 78-inch reach, 14-1 record, 7-1 in the UFC. Styles for this fight. Obviously, guys, these are both brawlers here. Pavlovich, 79% of his wins by KO. Very talented, skillful Soviet boxing style that Sergei has. Very clean, keeps his hands tight, has very good straight punches, very strong and fast straight punches for his size too. What I also wrote as a strength, this guy was a fucking, not even a marauder. He was a monster in the cage. Before he got knocked out by Aspinall, he was an absolute behemoth monster. It didn't seem like anybody was going to be able to dispatch of Sergei Pavlovich. But weakness here is I feel like Tom Aspinall forever changed Sergei's ability to fight the way he used to, at least using recent fights as examples. Sergei just does not seem to be the same fighter he was before getting KO'd by Aspinall, in my opinion. That is something I worry about a lot, and you'll kind of hear more about that as we go on here. But Cortes-Acosta, 43% of his wins by KO, 50% of his wins by decision. Solid boxing with obviously a fucking fantastic jab. Like, this guy's jab is money, but he also has that overhand because he used to be a pitcher. I think he's from the Dominican Republic. He used to be a pitcher, so he's got that overhand that can go and really hurt his opponents. But he definitely, fights behind the jab. It's a very educated boxing style that he has. Weaknesses for him is he can kind of have some of those boring performances where, although I can be very, as someone who's into striking, I can sit there and admire the jab that he puts out. I also can see why people get bored of that type of style because he'll just jab his opponent's face off. Another weakness to call out is the reach disadvantage he will have against Pavlovich in this fight, because Pavlovich obviously with an 84-inch reach and he has 78 inches. There's about a 6-inch differential there in favor of Pavlovich and not in favor of Waldo Cortes. Now, looking at their momentum, Sergei coming off of a win. Last fought 2-1-25, had a very bad fight, very boring fight against Rosenstruik. Rosenstruik literally got dropped after that. Before that, he had a loss to Volkov, and before that, he had a loss to Aspinall. And prior to that, he had a win over Blaze, very dominant win too. And then taking a look at Cortes-Acosta, last fought June 7, 2025, got a win over Spivak. Before that, a win over Ryan Spann. Before that, a win over Despain and a win over Arlovsky before that. Intangibles and X factors. Neither one of these guys are the home fighter. Pavlovich, he's going to have pressure, guys, because he's going to want to just continue to maintain his spot in the rankings and also build some momentum off of his last win, because his last win was a bit lackluster. On the side of Cortes-Acosta, he has probably way more pressure because this is his shot at not only cracking the higher part of the heavyweight rankings, but also keeping that 5-fight win streak alive. So that is going to be high pressure for him. Ultimately, guys, I am being bold here. I had a thought that Cortes-Acosta would just, kind of do the thing that he's done to every other heavyweight guy where he might have a very close fight and just, not buzz his way through Pavlovich, but get past Pavlovich in that regard. But I am feeling like Pavlovich can get this one done, guys. So I did put worried, but I am picking Pavlovich. I think Pavlo is going to have that size advantage in terms of the reach here. And I think if Pavlovich can fight behind his straight punches, maybe get Waldo Cortes-Acosta to attack and, time it well. And also, I think Pavlovich showed in his last fight, he does have that Russian ability to mix in some grappling and wrestling. I would like to see him do that against Cortes-Acosta if he can find that opportunity. And I just think he might have more ways to score. I don't really see it being a knockout, guys. Like with Pavlovich recently and also Cortes-Acosta, I don't necessarily see either one of them like really going for a finish. I see them kind of being like tit for tat on the feet and then it going to decision, to be honest. 3 out of 5 confidence. The next fight, and what I believe is the co-main event of the evening for this fight card, we've got Brian T. City Ortega versus Aljamain Sterling. 34 years old for Brian Ortega, 5'8", 69-inch reach, 16-4 record with an 8-4 record in the UFC. Aljo, on the other hand, 36 years old, 5'7", 71-inch reach, 21-5, 16-5 in the UFC. Look at that wealth of experience in the UFC, guys. Styles for this fight, Brian Ortega is obviously a very solid grappler, very good submission threats there as well. I also really rate Brian Ortega's boxing highly. I think he is a very good boxer. He's got those fundamentals down, and he's been able to show his ability to box some of his opponent's face off, like Korean Zombie, for instance. 50% of his wins by submission. Some weaknesses, although he has solid boxing, he doesn't have the best ability to defend certain strikes. Like obviously we've seen him get caught, but then also I think that he can. I feel like Brian Ortega's style, I feel like I could just see a grappler, like someone who's not a submission ace, but like someone like Volk, right, was able to get him down and just kind of control him on the ground and land shots. And that is a weakness I will call out, especially against someone like Aljo, who, looking at his strengths, has obviously, was a former champion and had a very good reign in his weight class. Because that weight class, I think the highest amount of title defenses is now Merab's. I think that is the case. Merab now has the most title defenses in bantamweight. Don't quote me on that. 33% of his wins by sub and 50% of his wins by decision. I say weaknesses for Aljo. Likely he is going to get outboxed in the feet by Ortega because I just don't think Aljo's striking is that clean. Momentum check. Both men are coming off of losses. Brian Ortega lost to Diego Lopez on 9/13/24 at the Sphere. Won over Yair before that, lost to Yair before that, and they lost to Volk before that. Now, on the other side, we've got Aljo, last fought on 12/7/24. He had a close fight with Mavzar, Grappler's Delight, a win over Calvin Kattar at UFC 300. I actually saw that live. He lost to Sean O'Malley before that, and a win over Cejudo before that. Intangibles and X Factors, neither one of these guys are the home fighters, but they both have a lot of pressure here. Ortega's got a lot of pressure to win, just so he can stay in the rankings there at the higher part of the rankings. I think he's number 8. Aljo, same thing for him. Pressured to get a win in this new weight class and rise up the ranks, although I think he'd only be moving up like one position. It is a way for him to stake his claim for someone else higher in the rankings. Ultimately, guys, I am going Aljo here. I just think that although Ortega's got better boxing, I think Aljo is just, he's got that fight IQ and that ability to find ways to win fights, especially at the championship level, just has more experience than Ortega there. And I also think that their grappling threats together is going to kind of like nullify or cancel one another out. I do think Aljo, although he's a little bit smaller in terms of height, I think Aljo is going to have the physicality advantage. And I think he'll be able to deploy that offensive wrestling and, just kind of take control of the fight from that perspective. I don't see this being like a KO. I definitely see this being like a take them down, grind them out type fight where Aljo's just getting those takedowns and winning that game. But we could also see some great grappling exchanges and even maybe a submission war. But I see Aljo just kind of controlling things with that offensive grappling, getting him to the ground, getting that top control. You might see Ortega throw up a couple submissions here and there, but I think Aljo and Ortega are so good on the ground And like Aljo's gone up against like Chase Hooper, guys who are a lot bigger than him, and actually beat him in a grappling match. So when you think of it from that perspective, I just feel like Aljo is going to be a bit craftier in finding ways to win the fight. I see going to decision, 4-5 confidence. And finally, guys, we got the main event of the evening. We got Johnny Walker versus Zhang Mingyang. So Johnny Walker is 33 years old, 6'6", 82.3-inch reach, 21-9 record with a 7-6 record in the UFC. Guys, if you watched the UFC in 2019, like I started watching it in 2019, like every week, obviously. And before Johnny Walker got KO'd by Corey Anderson, I think that was actually at the Madison Square Garden card. Let's see how good my memory is. I'll look it up after this. But Johnny Walker was like the force to be reckoned with. And everybody was saying like Johnny Walker should fight John Jones. Like he'll give him such a hard time. And then Johnny Walker just went on like Looney Tune KO streak, like out of nowhere. Anyway, Zhang Mingyang, 26 years old, turning 27 on 8/16 when Dricus is defending his belt. 6'2", 75-inch reach, 19-6 record, 3-0 in the UFC. Styles for this fight. So Johnny Walker, as we know, very talented and very athletic striker. 76% of his wins by KO, 14% of his wins by sub. So he does have that ability to mix in those submissions if he needs to. What I would say is he just has that crazy striking with outlandish athleticism. Like he does like some of the most athletic things for his size that I've seen. The weakness, as you can see in all caps, very bad chin. Johnny Walker needs to go to heavyweight, guys. I think he's not doing it probably because his brother's there. But like, I think that he had mentioned on the Jackson podcast, he walks around at like 250. So I think he's just always going to have that chin aspect at light heavyweight. He's got to drop too much weight. And I think his brain just can't handle it. That's very worrisome going up against Zhang Mingyang, where his strengths are 68% of his wins by KO, 32% of his wins by sub, and then check this out, 64% striking accuracy, which is fucking nuts. Like you barely see any guys in the UFC getting over 59%. Like to have 64 is solid. But in addition to that, he lands 10.91 strikes per minute. Now that is, you have to remember, he only has 3 fights in the UFC, so it's easier to have a higher rate there. But a lot of his fights, he's finished in the first round. So like that is very intense. 10.91 strikes per minute is crazy. Weaknesses, I would just say Mingyang didn't seem to have very good answers or good defense to those calf kicks, especially up against Anthony Smith. Although Anthony Smith got his ass whooped, I think Mingyang took way too many calf kicks, and that is not something he's going to want to do against Johnny Walker, who, as we know, Johnny Walker has an uncanny ability to throw like double calf kicks. Like he can throw a calf kick and reset, throw it again before you're even able to like read the first one just landed. So that is something to be on the lookout for in this fight. Momentum check. Johnny Walker coming off of 2 losses. He last fought on June 22nd, 2024, where he was KO'd by Ozdemir. Before that, he got a loss KO again by Ankalaev. Before that, a no contest to Ankalaev, and then a win over Anthony Smith. On the side of Zhang Mingyang, 12-fight win streak, which is fantastic. He last fought April 26, 2025 with a win over Anthony Smith. Before that, a win over Diaz, a win over Ribeiro, and a win over Daukaus before that. Intangibles and X factors. Obviously, Johnny Walker not the home fighter. Pressure, he is on a 2-fight losing streak. He's not going to want to be on a 3-fight one, so he's got to get a win here. Zhang Mingyang, home fighter. He's not only the home fighter, but he's got this massive win streak. He is going to want to not only just get this win, but get that win at home. And some other variables I've called out. I'm just not sure if Zhang Mingyang has fought someone who's got the length and size of Johnny Walker, 6'6", very long reach as well. So I don't know if he's fought someone with those type of stats previously. But guys, I got to say, I'm not worried about it. I think Mingyang is going to go out there with the game that he usually does. I think he's going to find Johnny Walker's chin at some point, and he will get a KO in this fight. I just think that although I love Johnny Walker, I think he's very fun. He has a really cool style as well. I just think, as I said, anytime he's at light heavyweight, he's too weight trained, and I feel like that is going to open up that opportunity for Zhang Mingyang to find his chin and ultimately get a KO. 4/5 confidence. There you guys have it. Those are my picks for the UFC Fight Night that is happening in Shanghai on August 23rd. Make sure you guys comment below who you are picking in the main event, co-main event. We'd love to hear from you guys. Also, make sure you give this video a like if you enjoyed, and please subscribe to Fight Feed if you haven't already, so you can stay on top of all the new content that I'll be posting. And I just want to say thank you guys so much for all of you that have been supporting and engaging. I truly, truly appreciate each and every one of you. And I'm never going to forget any of you. If my channel someday blows up, I'll remember the ones that have been there. So I truly appreciate it, guys, and you will see me in the next one.